the leading thread in my work with the UN and Red Cross is, of course, disasters in different kinds and manners. But as you realize, the focus now of the work of ISDR, the International Strategy for Disaster Reduction, is on prevention and mitigation of disasters. ISDR is not a new creation. It was established as a successor organization to the IDNDR, which maybe some of you will remember. ISDR was established in the year 2000 and worked its way calmly until the tsunami. And just like for many other countries and people and organizations, also for ISDR, the tsunami changed many things. The tsunami gave a very strong impetus to the Yoga Framework for Action, which is a document that I would now really commend for your reading if you haven't done it before. This is the shortest version of it, actually. There's a longer one. And the reason why I'm saying that the second impetus to really understand the practical center of disaster risk reduction is now when we're faced with a much stronger understanding of the climate risk issues. What is disaster risk reduction? Well, it's not the technical issue, it's a strategic approach, but it also has many technical components. It's about land use planning, it's about infrastructural planning, it's about education, it's about disaster preparedness and disaster response, because disaster risk reduction does not stop disasters from happening. The job is to reduce the impact of disasters. You know, because it's probably been said many times in this room, that the causes of disasters are really us human beings. It's the way we build societies, it's how we build and live in very vulnerable environment, and the pressure that we put on the environment that are the main causes of many of the disasters that we see. So the disaster risk reduction, both by the previous and the current Secretary General, has been appreciated as a very important function for United Nations. And the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon already in his first few months made a strong policy directive to United Nations about risk reduction and basically told all of us to accelerate our action. And in the same spirit, he agreed to establish a more senior function to lead the risk reduction Secretariat. And you have, of course, taken notice, I'm sure, of the Secretary General's strong engagement in the climate change issues. And you will have noticed that he says that this is the year of climate change. Now, the disaster risk reduction community, we are working with all kinds of risks, seismic risks, earthquakes, and what we call weather-related meteorological and hydrological risks. As you also know, 80 to 90% of all the disasters that happen are caused by weather-related risks. That's rains, floods, and all the other related issues. And that there is an increasing evidence of much more higher frequency and severity of these disasters. So that's the overall context of where we are working, and we are working, of course, through the UN system, directly with governments, with NGOs, with corporate sector. We're trying to contribute to increase knowledge. We want to provide instruments for risk reductive approaches, and we want to be very strong advocates for more wise behavior. And we are not alone. I mean, today, thanks to the increasing understanding of climate risk, there are so many advocates for the issues. Risk reduction, where does it fit in the climate risk area? The main, you know that reducing the impact of climate change is, of course, primarily about mitigation, reducing emissions. Without that, it doesn't matter if we adapt. But adaptation is a very wide concept, which we would like to think that the risk reduction learning over the last 2 to 3 decades is the most immediate instrument to contribute to adaptation, and adaptation, of course, also will reduce risk. So what you will probably hear, I have no doubt about it, is that there will be an increasing use of risk reduction approaches for adaptation planning as it moves along. Unfortunately, we are not quite there on an acceleration of adaptation. But there are many speakers. You have listened to Nick Stern, you have listened to strong advocates from the environment side, you have listened to recently to Prince Charles, who picked up a very strong message last week from one of the chief scientists of the International Panel for Climate Change, who said in 2007, when we set the time frame for minimal action before things are irreversibly damaged in our ecosystem, last week he said in 2007 we did not have enough data in 2007. Now in 2009 we know that everything is much more urgent and that we have a much shorter time frame if we want to take action that does not that prevents inevitable damage. What you will find interesting if you get to read this is that already in 2005, when this document was agreed with 135 governments, an immense number of NGOs and other institutions, and the UN, of course, already climate risk was here, together with all the other risk elements that we live in our society. So for this community that has worked with many different kinds of disasters, but it's always been mainly hydrological and meteorological disasters that have impacted livelihoods, undermined people's ability for development, threatened development investments, and overall costing our increasingly complex and our increasingly wealthy societies a lot of money.